Okay, let's kick things off. Can you even wrap your head around a land animal that might have, well, outweighed a blue whale?
It's pretty wild to think about, isn't it?
We're talking about Bruhathkayosaurus, a dinosaur from India. And its estimated size it pushes the limits of what seems possible on land.
Absolutely. It's one of those discoveries that really makes you question everything.
So today on the deep dive, we're going into the fascinating, maybe slightly frustrating world of this giant.
Frustrating because the evidence is so tricky.
Exactly. Our mission here is to look at what little we actually know from the fossils, understand the scientific debate around it.
And figure out why it's still such a huge puzzle in paleontology.
Right. And all this, it comes from digging into the scientific papers, the discussions that have kind of swirled around since it was first found.
And what grabs you immediately is just the sheer scale we might be dealing with.
Yeah.
Those early numbers put Bruhathkayosaurus basically in the same weight category as the biggest animal alive today.
Which makes you wonder how? How could a land animal get that big? What are the limits?
Precisely. Those are the big questions it raises.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. We need to go back to around 1978.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the Kalamiddu Formation in India, near Kalamiddu village in Tamil Nadu. That's where this story starts, with finding some just enormous bone fragments.
Yeah, like little clues scattered across, 70 million years?
Exactly. And the timing, the geological context, that's important too, right?
Oh, definitely. It's the late Cretaceous, the Maastrichtian stage, maybe 70 million years ago.
Which was prime time for titanosaurs.
Exactly. These giant long-necked dinosaurs were really thriving then, so finding big bones isn't totally out of left field for India during this period.
But the potential size hinted at here.
Yeah.
That's the kicker.
That's what makes Bruhathkayosaurus stand out. So this first set of bones, the holotype specimen, GSI PLSR20,
Right.
it included bits of the hip, the ilium and ischium parts of the leg bones, like the femur and tibia.
Thigh bone and shin bone, yeah.
Yeah. A radius, so from the forearm, and a piece of the tail, a vertebra.
Okay, now here's where it gets really, really interesting for me.
Uh-huh.
When Yadagiri and Ayasami first described these massive bits in 1987, they didn't say giant plant eater.
No, they didn't, which is kind of baffling in retrospect.
They called it a carnisaurian theropod,
Yeah.
like a huge meat eater. I think Allosaurus or something in that family.
Yeah, it really shows how tough interpreting fragments can be. Maybe just the sheer size made them think, giant predator.
Could be.
But even then, the name they picked, Bruhathkayosaurus, it means huge-bodied lizard in Sanskrit.
So the name itself hinted at the size, even if they got the group wrong initially.
Exactly. And the species name, Matley, honors Charles Alfred Matley, a British paleontologist who actually did a lot of work in India. So the name was spot on for size, if not for diet at first.
Almost like a cruel joke, though, isn't it? This potentially massive dinosaur, perfectly named.
And the very ground it was buried in worked against it.
Yeah, tell us about that, the Kalamiddu Formation. Sounds like a bad place for fossils.
Well, yeah, you've got monsoon seasons, right? The sands and clays there get saturated with water.
Okay.
Think about bones getting soaked, then drying out over and over. That constant expansion and contraction makes them incredibly brittle, friable.
Ah,
And that's sadly what happened. These huge original fossils apparently just started disintegrating inside their protective plaster jackets.
before they even got properly looked at.
Before they reached the Geological Survey of India, yeah, they basically just crumbled away. They don't exist anymore.
Wow. So it's like trying to solve a murder mystery where the body vanished.
Pretty much, you're left with just notes and drawings from the crime scene.
So with those key pieces gone,
Yeah.
how did we get from giant T-Rex cousin to, well, an even bigger long neck? What changed?
That's the next key moment. It brings us to Sankar Chatterjee's work in 1995.
Okay.
He went back to the original description, the notes, the measurements taken back in 87.
The ones made before the bones disintegrated.
Exactly. And looked at the few line drawings and those photos taken while the bones were still in the ground.
Okay.
And based on that, he made a compelling case that no, this wasn't a theropod. The features pointed towards it being a titanosaurian sauropod.
A long-necked plant eater, which makes more sense given the potential size.
It fits much better with what we know about truly giant dinosaurs.
But still, basing it on lost evidence must leave a lot of uncertainty, like building a case on hearsay.
Oh, absolutely. And that's been a huge part of the debate ever since. How much can you really say for sure?
So what have other studies said?
Well, understandably, some later papers listed it as just an indeterminate sauropod, basically. It's a long neck, but we can't pin it down more than that.
Or worse.
Or even a nomen dubium, which is like saying the name exists, but the evidence it's based on is too poor to be sure it's a distinct, identifiable thing, a doubtful name.
Because the original paper lacked detail.
Yeah, the original publication didn't have enough detailed diagnostic features, unique things that say, this is definitely this specific dinosaur. Plus, relying on just a few drawings and photos.
It leaves room for doubt. I remember seeing online chatter about maybe it being petrified wood.
That speculation did pop up. Petrified wood can be massive, and you find it in similar rocks. But yeah, that just shows the level of uncertainty we're dealing with.
So the case seemed kind of shaky. But wasn't there a more recent development? Something about new photos?
Yes, exactly. In 2022, Pal and Ayasami published again. They presented photographs that apparently hadn't been widely circulated before.
Of what?
Supposedly showing the tibia of the shin bone, both as it was found in the dig site and also wrapped in its plaster jacket.
And their argument was?
That these photos strengthen the case for it being titanosaurian. That the features you can see are consistent with a giant sauropod.
Okay, so maybe some visual confirmation finally.
Well, potentially. But science works through challenges, right? So Mojave and colleagues responded in 2024.
And they weren't convinced.
They basically argued that while the photos are interesting, they don't definitively settle the issue. They don't fully resolve questions about what bone it is or confirm Bruhathkayosaurus as a valid, clearly defined species.
So the mystery isn't quite solved yet.
Not by a long shot. The debate continues.
Okay, so with all this debate about even what the bones were and the fact that they're gone, how on earth do paleontologists estimate the size? It feels like guesswork squared.
It is challenging. It's like trying to guess the size of a whole building from a few bricks, and you're not even 100% sure they're bricks.
Oh, right.
Essentially, all the size estimates go back to those measurements reported in the original 1987 paper.
The measurements taken before everything fell apart.
Correct. So let's take the shin bone, the tibia. It was reported as 2 meters long. That's about 6.5 feet.
Just the shin bone.
Yeah. Now put that in context. The fibula, another lower leg bone of Argentinosaurus, which is famously huge.
Right, often cited as the biggest.
Its fibula is about 1.55 meters. So this supposed tibia of Bruhathkayosaurus is reported as nearly 30% longer.
Okay, that's significant.
Then there's the lower end of the femur, the thigh bone, measured at 75 centimeters across, about 2.5 feet.
And compared to other giants?
Compared to Anarctosaurus giganteus, another huge one, that's about 33% larger at that specific point.
Wow.
And the ilium, part of the hip, recorded as 1.2 meters long, almost 4 feet.
So even the individual pieces, assuming the measurements are right, are just enormous.
They scream giant, absolutely.
But, okay, how do you get from a 2-meter shin bone to, it was 40 meters long and weighed 200 tons? What's the leap there?
That involves a lot of comparative anatomy and scaling. Basically, you look at more complete skeletons of related dinosaurs, other titanosaurs in this case.
Ones we know better.
Right. And you assume, well, maybe Bruhathkayosaurus had similar proportions. You use the ratios from the known ones to estimate the missing bits.
That sounds prone to error.
It definitely is, especially with fragmentary remains. And this is where some of those early, really eye-popping online estimates came from.
I remember seeing those.
Yeah, back in 2001, Mickey Mortimer put out initial figures suggesting like 44 meters long, 145 feet, and maybe 175 to 220 tons.
Just incredible numbers.
But, you know, science refines itself. As we learn more about other titanosaurs like Saltosaurus, Opisthecoelacadia.
More complete ones.
Exactly. Mortimer revised those estimates downwards. Still huge, maybe 28 to 47 meters long, so 92 to 154 feet. But he actually pulled back from giving a new weight estimate then.
Why?
He acknowledged just how inaccurate weight estimates can be for animals this incomplete. It's just too speculative.
So, as we found more titanosaurs, the picture for Bruhathkayosaurus got maybe slightly less extreme, but still giant.
Sort of, yeah. The context changed. Then in 2008, Matt Waddell tried a different comparison, looking directly at Argentinosaurus.
Okay.
His calculations, scaling from Argentinosaurus, suggested Bruhathkayosaurus could have weighed up to 126 metric tons, or 139 short tons.
Still absolutely massive.
Definitely. But then you get other interpretations. Gregory S. Paul, in 2019, he threw a curveball.
What did he suggest?
He proposed that maybe that 2-meter bone wasn't a tibia at all. Maybe it was actually a badly weathered femur, a thigh bone.
Whoa, okay. How does that change things?
Well, if it's a femur, Its length would be only slightly bigger than the femurs of giants like Dreadnoughtus or Futalonctosaurus, not quite as extreme a difference. I
Interesting.
also noted the ilium size was similar to Dreadnoughtus, so based on reinterpreting that key bone, Paul estimated a length around 37 meters, 121 feet, and a weight of about 95 metric tons, 105 short tons.
So still enormous, but maybe brought back down into the range of the other supergiants, not necessarily vastly exceeding them.
Exactly. It shows how much hinges on identifying even a single crucial fragment correctly.
So we've got this real spread of possibilities. And you mentioned Argentinosaurus as the main comparison. How big do we generally think that one was?
Argentinosaurus is usually estimated around, say, 35 meters long, maybe 115 feet, and weighing somewhere between 65 and 100 tons.
But that's also based on fragments, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the key thing to remember. Argentinosaurus itself is known from pretty incomplete stuff, too.
So we're comparing one uncertainty to another uncertainty.
Pretty much. The whole process of scaling up from partial bones is inherently tricky. Especially with titanosaurs, we just don't have that many really complete skeletons.
What makes it so hard?
Well, things like tail length can vary a lot, and trying to figure out the actual mass, the weight from just bones, that's even tougher.
Because you don't know about muscle fat.
Exactly. Think about two people the same height, they can have vastly different weights based on build. We just don't have that soft tissue information for dinosaurs.
It really is mind-blowing, though, that we're even having this conversation about land animals potentially getting into the blue whale size range.
It is. The blue whale, largest animal on Earth today. Adults can hit 30 meters, 98 feet, and the heaviest ones weigh maybe 170, up to almost 200 tons.
So if those higher estimates for Bruhathkayosaurus are right,
Then yeah, you're talking about a land animal possibly matching or even exceeding a blue whale in weight, which from a biomechanics perspective is just, wow, how did it support that? How did it move?
so many questions. Now, you also mentioned another one of these ghost giants, Meropunosaurus fragilis,
Ah, yes,
But-
perhaps an even bigger enigma.
bigger than Bruhathkayosaurus.
Well, the estimates are all over the place, and it's based on even less evidence, just a single vertebra drawing. The actual bone is lost.
Seriously, just one bone drawing.
Yeah. Initially, back in 2006, Kenneth Carpenter estimated it could have been maybe 58 meters long, 190 feet, and weighed 122 tons.
That's insane.
But he later revised that way down in 2018, thinking it might be related to a different group, Ribboxysaurids.
Yeah.
His newer estimate was closer to 32 meters.
So a huge revision.
Huge.
Yeah.
Then Gregory Paul weighed in again in 2019, suggesting maybe 35 to 40 meters and 80 to 120 tons. It just shows how incredibly speculative this gets with such poor evidence.
So these giants, Bruhathkayosaurus, Meropunosaurus, they're like these legendary figures based on whispers and lost relics.
That's a good way to put it. Lots of debate, lots of revisions as we learn more, or reinterpret the old clues.
So where does the latest thinking sort of settle on Bruhathkayosaurus's weight, if anywhere?
Well, Paul and Laura Mendy, in their 2023 work, suggested a range for Bruhathkayosaurus of about 110 to 170 tons.
Still potentially blue whale territory.
Potentially, yeah. Though they felt the lower end of that, maybe 110 to 130 tons, was probably more likely.
Why the range?
They noted if you scale it based on Patagotitan, another really big, well-understood titanosaur, you get higher numbers.
Yeah.
But they felt over 170 tons was maybe pushing it.
Right.
But Paul makes an interesting point. He argues that we shouldn't maybe dismiss these super sauropods out of hand.
Because
Because sauropods were around for a long time, evolutionarily speaking. They had this incredibly efficient body plan, small head, huge gut, pillar legs, maybe air sacs making bones lighter.
a good design for getting big.
A great design. And with abundant plant food. He thinks it's plausible that some lineages could have really pushed the size limits. He suggests something over 150 tons, like Bruhathkayosaurus or Meropunosaurus, isn't biologically impossible.
Fascinating. So it's possible we just haven't found good enough fossils yet.
Or maybe we have, and they crumbled away like Bruhathkayosaurus.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mhm.
what are the main things we should take away about this mysterious giant?
I think the core idea is Bruhathkayosaurus represents potentially one of the largest dinosaurs ever, but it's known only from very limited, fragmented, and now unfortunately lost fossils from India.
And its identity is still debated.
Absolutely. Initially called a theropod, now thought to be a titanosaur, but its exact classification and especially its size are really uncertain.
Everything relies on those original measurements and comparisons.
Exactly. All the size estimates depend heavily on scaling from other titanosaurs, which often aren't perfectly known themselves, so there are layers of uncertainty.
It's a story full of like tantalizing hints, but huge gaps. But even with all that missing info, the idea of Bruhathkayosaurus, it really captures the imagination, doesn't it?
It really does, because it challenges what we think we know about how big life on land can get.
Yeah.
It forces you to think about the biology, the environment. What allowed such extreme gigantism? Have we even found the biggest yet?
It really makes you wonder what other giants are still out there, buried. And maybe future finds or better ways to analyze fragments could completely change the picture again.
For sure. The story of these super sauropods feels like it's still unfolding, maybe hidden just beneath our feet.
Well, thanks for exploring this incredible, if elusive, giant with us. Makes you think about the sheer scale of life's history.
Always does. Thanks for having me.